And I'm the parent of a 2-year-old toddler, and uncle of a 7-year-old, so the child tax credit is very personal for me. Now, we've been involved at Community Change Action in the fight for income support, including the child tax credit, for a long time. And when President Biden put forward his Build Back Better agenda in 2021, we had a chance to pass a transformative, expanded version of these policies that was permanent. These policies that were meant to help families and workers build a foundation where they not only can survive, but to thrive. Now, the American Rescue Plan included the people who needed the child tax credit the most, the poorest folks, particularly black mothers, and we organized with our grassroots partners to make sure those people got it, and we saw millions lifted out of poverty from the child tax credit. Not since Lyndon Johnson has any president moved the needle so much on poverty. Collectively, the expanded child tax credit and stimulus checks lifted over 18 million people out of poverty, making 2021 the year with the lowest child poverty rates for black and brown kids in American history. The government provided no strings attached relief that empowered people to make the financial decisions that made the most sense for them, and in turn helped the domestic economy get going again. $1 of investment around the child tax credit equals $8 into local economies. $1 of investment, Senator Booker, into the child tax credit, into working families' pockets equals $8 into local economies. So we've been working, all of us here have been working to continue the expanded versions of the child tax credit and the EITC. But we also know that 4 million children were thrown back below the poverty line when the temporary expanded CTC expired. Rising costs continue to be a major blow to American families. And think about that for a minute. The status quo is millions of children in poverty in one of the richest countries in the history of the world. This is not an inevitability. This is a policy choice, and it is cruel to throw millions of children back into poverty. We know this is a policy choice. You can boo on that, by the way. We know that this is a policy choice because we made the other choice to expand and enhance the CTC. And when we did, we cut child poverty almost in half. So the choice in front of us now is to prioritize some of the wealthiest corporations in the world. We could prioritize some of the wealthiest companies in the world who have taken advantage of the last few years to wildly inflate prices while they reap in record profits. Or we can prioritize families, workers, and the bright futures of the next generation, the backbone of our economy. When we empower people to meet their immediate needs, to pay down their debts, to spend on local businesses, and save for the future, we know that we can create an economy that is better for all of us. So now it is my deep pleasure to introduce one of the senators who has been a champion of families and of the child tax credit for a very long time. He's going to talk to us about what we can do to push the child tax credit through the lame duck session before the end of the year. From the great state of Ohio, please join me in welcoming Senator Sherrod Brown.
Thank you, sir. We love you, Sherrod. I like the way you get him. Easy, Corey. It's the only time you've ever said that. Or that you've even acted like you. Anyway, thank you. In many ways, this is Raphael Warnock's day, and I want to explain why. So go back to March 6th of 2021, and I was sitting on the floor, as we all were. 2 votes. One was 51-50, one was 50-49, I think. Rand Paul or somebody stepped out to the bathroom, whatever the reason. But we won it by 1 vote. We won the child tax credit by 1 vote both times. It was March 6th. It was a Saturday around noon. We'd been voting for 13 hours. And we passed the bill with the child tax credit that Corey worked on, and Susan and all of us. And I remember turning to Bob Casey, who sits next to me, and say, "This is the best day of my career." I'd worked on it for 7-8 years, as so many of you had. And so about an hour later, I called Raphael Warnock, who was heading back to Georgia, and I said, "Raphael, congratulations, this wouldn't have happened without you." And he said, "It's funny, Sherrod, it took you 10 years to do this, it took me 2 months." So anyway, that's in the spirit of Raphael Warnock for joining Senator Bennett and Senator Booker and me in doing this. Largest tax cut for working families ever. 92% of children in Ohio, in those families with children in Ohio, 92% of those kids saw money, their families saw money in their pockets. That's 2 million children in Ohio. Cut the poverty rate nearly in half. One thing the Senate did. Starting in July, the checks went out. July 15th, August, September, October, November. We know what that did for families. It's the most consequential thing we've done in decades to make that hard work pay off. I hope our Republican colleagues are listening. We'll fix R&D. I love these signs. No R&D without the child tax credit. Get the deal done now. R&D, child tax credit now. The deal's on the table. We'll fix other corporate tax issues like the 19 to 2017 tax law, but only if we expand CTC and EITC. That's the deal. It's on the table. We say to Republicans, accept the deal and we'll move forward. Parents across Ohio have told me what a difference this bill has made in their lives. As Mr. Warren said, it's cut the poverty rate among children, among families by 40%. Imagine during this period of inflation if the child tax credit were in effect. Imagine for families that barely make it having that $250 or $300 per child per month coming in to blunt the effects of inflation. They made such a difference, they need to continue. We remember what happened in 2017. Lobbyists lined up down the hall from Mitch McConnell's office. Republicans delivered a massive tax cut to the wealthy. They left parents behind, they left kids behind. Those same lobbyists are again lining up asking for another tax cut on top of the one they've already got. It's pretty simple again. No corporate tax cuts without the child tax credit. The deal is on the table. It's the deal. It's on the table for Republicans to take. I'll stop there and turn it over to Tammy Lunan, who's joining us from the Ohio Organizing Collaborative. Ms. Lunan.
We love you, Tammy.
Thank you, Senator Brown and Community Change Action for this opportunity to advocate for our families. My name is Tammy Lunan, and I'm the Care Economy Organizing Director at the Ohio Organizing Collaborative. I'm a first-generation immigrant and daughter and granddaughter of care workers and educators. The experiences of my mother and grandmother when they immigrated to the United States are not very different from what families across the United States are facing today. With the increasing cost of rent, food, childcare, gas, it's never been more expensive to raise a family and to just get by in Ohio. Our families and communities are in a state of emergency, and we have a common sense solution in the expanded child tax credit and the earned income tax credit. In 2020, I began talking to parents across Ohio. While their stories were different, their experiences were deeply connected. Jason and his wife welcomed their first child in 2020. The monthly child tax credit payments provided a sense of peace for him and his wife because it was a chunk of money that they didn't have to stress out about every month. It helped them to survive, to plan, and to have hope for an improved quality of life. Along with thousands of other Ohioans, Jason was laid off during the pandemic. He found a new job, but it paid half as much. They used the child tax credit to pay for childcare and other living expenses, helping to make up for the difference in his missing income. Then there are moms like Amber Nixon, a small business owner and mother of 2 active toddlers. Amber and her husband always use the funds from the CTC to pay for bills, either current bills, catching up on past due bills, or trying to pay bills in advance so they could have some relief with their monthly expenses. Losing the CTC had a major impact. Most people like Amber, who are self-employed with children, really are working paycheck to paycheck with minimal extra funds for saving. That's why her family looked forward to those extra payments. It gave families like Amber's a chance to breathe and not be in survival mode as much. For families like Amber and Jason's and millions of parents and families across Ohio and the nation, there's so much at stake. These investments in our families allowed families to reimagine their lives, and most importantly, it allowed them to experience more joy and dignity in their day-to-day lives. We know that the child tax credit works. It helped lift over 3 million children out of poverty, but sent them right back when access to these funds ended. We want Congress to understand that our families know what we've long understood. Poverty is a policy choice. We will no longer bail out the banks. We will no longer bail out corporations until you bail out our families and give them a hand up in attaining their version of the American dream. Let's get this deal done now.
Amen. Amen. All right. All right.
I just want to give you all the love. The original child tax credit champion, the one, the only from the great state of Connecticut, Rosa DeLauro.
Love you, Rosa.
Love you. Love you. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. And it's wonderful to see everyone here this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining with us. And, you know, to all the advocates who are here, I want to just say thank you, really helping to build the economic power for all Americans. And Dorian, I say thank you to you. Senator, thank you very, very much, a partner. Tammy, you spoke eloquently. It is about that financial stability that the child tax credit provides to families. That's what this is all about. And of course, to my colleagues, to Senator Booker, to Senator Bennett, and to Susan Del Bene and Richie Torres in the House, thank you. We are the CTC 6. We really are, and we will continue to be the CTC 6. So, and we're there to say we need to talk about the importance of the expanded and the improved child tax credit, making it permanent. Everyone has been so outstanding in this fight, and a fight that I have been involved in for nearly 20 years. We were all proud that the Biden administration included the child tax credit in the American Rescue Plan, the largest tax cut for working families in generations, a lifeline to the middle class. And expanding and improving the child tax credit drove the largest decrease in child poverty in history. Yes, in history. It helped families to make ends meet, as Tammy pointed out and others will point out. The difference between being able to pay a light bill, fill a gas tank, pay for child care, yes, so that someone could go to work, and the naysayers and those who demean working families to say if you got the tax credit, you wouldn't go to work. They have no idea of the pride that people have in their jobs and their ability to take care of their families. They don't know it because they live high on the hill and on the hog as well. So this is, so it lifted 4 million out of poverty, 26% decline in hunger for families with children. I don't know if we have ever seen another federal program that has such an impact in such a short amount of time. We deal with a lot of federal programs. Some have gone on forever. But you know, this, and they don't achieve their goal. This program achieved its goal in the first 6 months of what we had intended it to be. Therefore, my friends, there is no reason to alter it, to water it down. Why would we want to weaken it? I strongly believe that the child tax credit is the most effective tool that we have in the fight against rising costs, an antidote to inflation. And again, it is about financial stability. Extending the improved child tax credit provides people and the families the support to navigate very challenging times. Those times exist right now. It is no soundbite. People live paycheck to paycheck today, and we have the ability to do something about it. Here is the bottom line. Working families did not abuse this benefit, as others would have you believe. The child tax credit supported workers, helped them get back to work. They used it to ensure their families were not just only surviving, but were thriving. And now the expanded child tax credit has lapsed and costs are rising. Families are counting on us to extend that expansion once more. So our goal is to ensure that by the end of this year, families will be able to use the expanded monthly child tax credit to help meet their most basic needs once again. We are coming to the end of the year where there is a clamor for tax cuts, for credits, for benefits, for the largest corporations, and I might add some of whom pay no taxes at all in this country. Our ask is simple. If we can provide tax cuts for America's corporations, we can certainly provide a tax cut for America's kids. And our task is clear. No R&D without CTC. So thank you. Thank you so much for joining today. Please join me in welcoming, where are you, Amber? Moms Rising member from New Hampshire, to say a few words. Amber?
Yes, ma'am.
There she comes. All right, there you are, lady. Good to see you. Thank you. Thanks so much for being here.
Of course. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amber McCory, and I am newly from Dublin, New Hampshire, although I was born and raised in New Hampshire. I'm a mom to 2 amazing kids, a 12-year-old son and a 9-year-old daughter, and I'm a proud member of Moms Rising. I'm also one of the millions of moms who are counting on Congress to restore the expanded child tax credit before the end of this year. But I'm so sorry, I always get emotional when I talk about this, so bear with me. My family has faced a significant amount of trauma and stress over the past year. For many years, I ran an in-home child care program, but last summer, when my landlord sold our building, I lost my home and my livelihood in one fell swoop. With the housing crisis in New Hampshire, there was simply nowhere for us to go. In order to avoid an eviction that I didn't deserve,
Take your time.
Take care.
Take your time.
Take your time.
my kids and I were forced to move into a camper in someone's backyard. Before long, though, it became too cold to stay there, and my daughter's belongings had started molding in her bed. When the landlord bailout came through in the form of the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, we moved into a small budget hotel while I continued to search for stable housing and employment that I could do with my disabilities. During that time, the monthly child tax credit payments were nothing short of a lifeline for my family. They especially helped with gas. When we first became unhoused and I lost my business, I earned money by delivering groceries. The child tax credit payments helped me cover the cost of gas so I could work and earn that income. The child tax credit payments also helped me provide as much stability as I could for my kids during a time of unprecedented and significant upheaval in our lives. They helped ensure I could maintain my daughter's access to health care. She sees a lot of specialists, including rheumatology, cardiology, physical therapy, occupational therapy, and more. At the time, we averaged about 4 to 5 doctor's appointments a week. Some are in Boston, others are in Manchester, Lebanon. The cost of gas to get her to and from her appointments adds up quickly, and the child tax credit payments were more than a huge source of relief. It was a tangible lifeline to ease that burden. When Republicans in the Senate ended the payments last December, it felt like the hole I was already in plummeted down another 3 feet, leaving me even further away from climbing back out of the perpetual state of poverty I found myself in. Despite the effort I had been making towards that goal, I was in a state of panic. I had to choose between basic needs, which is impossible. How do you choose between getting food on the table and paying for gas to get your child to the doctor? I've had to neglect my own medical care to ensure my children are taken care of. I understand that this, at least in my opinion, is a band-aid on top of a larger problem, but it's something that helps real people right now that are close to breaking that cycle of poverty that we're in. It helps push us over that hump. I don't understand how any elected leader could support taking away such an essential source of support for kids and families. It has been a long, hard, traumatic road for my family. I have a genetic condition, an autoimmune disease, which limits the kinds of work I can do. Eventually, the grocery delivery job impacted my health, and when I tried to push through, I landed in the hospital. So instead, I found a remote job as a customer service representative for a book distributor. Because our hotel didn't have Wi-Fi, I was working from my friend's son's bunk bed, or from a different friend's basement, or someone's floor near their router. I also went back to school for public policy so I could broaden my career opportunities and try to make change that's so desperately needed. After over a year of being unhoused, we finally moved into a new apartment last month, but the rent is too damn high. And my full-time job only pays rent and oil. That's it, my entire paycheck. And the contract for my customer service job ends in January. We're also struggling with the soaring cost of gas and food. If Congress restored the child tax credit expansion, it would help pay for my rent and provide so much stability and peace of mind for my family and for millions of others. Because I know what it's like to have more bills than income, I'm especially passionate about making the child tax credit fully refundable so families with little or no income can access it. That is when families need it most, and it will help stop that perpetuation of poverty that plagues everyday people who just want to be self-reliant and climb out of the hole that we find ourselves in. Moms like me are counting on Congress to pass another expansion of the child tax credit before the end of this year. With the rising cost of essentials and ongoing impact of the pandemic, families need it more than ever. This needs to be a priority before any tax cuts to corporations. We need our elected leaders to put the needs of kids and families first. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amber, for sharing your heartfelt story. I think we all felt it. Next up, one of the CTC 6 from the great state of Colorado, Senator Bennett.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for being out here today. Young people, thank you for being out here today, and thank you for bringing your older people with you. We really, really appreciate it, but it's a reminder of what this is really all about. Rosa, thank you and your colleagues for your incredible leadership. And when I heard Amber speaking just a minute ago, I could have, it was exactly like the conversations that I've had over the last years in Colorado with moms that are struggling in an economy that's not working well enough for their families. And, you know, Tammy said earlier that poverty is a policy choice. I could not agree with that more. Let me tell you what the evidence for that is. You are standing today in the richest country in the world, and we have the third highest poverty rate in the industrialized world. That's a choice that we've made. We have the worst income inequality that we have had in this country in a century right now in the United States of America. And that's the result of an economy that for 50 years, since Ronald Reagan was our president, has benefited the top 10% of Americans when it's grown and not anybody else. And the response of this place largely has been to practice something called trickle-down or supply-side economics. And what we're here today to say is we can do something better than that. We passed something very important when we passed the American Rescue Plan, this enhanced child tax credit. And you know what? It actually did what we said it was going to do. Do you know how rare that is for that building? For the stuff people promise and say it's going to do this and say it's going to do that. In this case, we said it'll cut childhood poverty almost in half. It cut childhood poverty almost in half. We cut hunger by 25%. They told us the IRS wouldn't be able to make these monthly payments to families, and you know what? They did just fine. And families were able to spend that money to support their kids. I don't have time, and you got to hear from Cory Booker, and I know you don't want to hear from me. I don't have time to tell you the millions of stories I've heard from families in Colorado about what they spent the money on. From paying the light bill, to paying the rent, to buying school clothes for their kids without breaking the bank. But let me summarize for you what I heard from the families that I work for in Colorado, and that is the stress that was relieved from them. Just a little bit of stress in an economy that hasn't worked well enough for them, the chance to pay a few extra bills without worrying about paying for the food bill the next month. And that's what this is all about in the richest country in the world. It is shameful that we let it lapse. We should have made it permanent, but we have the chance now to do that again. And what you're hearing from the members of Congress that are here today, and what you're hearing from these advocates and from the kids that are here today, is that we've all been around here. Well, not you guys, but a lot. These guys, if they were watching C-SPAN, they've been around here. To see this place burn the midnight oil, stay up till 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning to make sure that they extended tax cuts for the wealthiest people in America, to make sure that they extended tax cuts for the largest corporations in America. And what we're saying this time is, before we go home, we should pass the biggest tax cut for working people in American history. That's what we need to do.
Yes, yes, yes.
And I couldn't be prouder to have, I should say also one other thing. Thank goodness Raphael Warnock is coming back to the United States Senate. Thank goodness he took over for Kamala Harris when she left the Senate. And he's done an amazing job on the child tax credit. But there has been nobody who's been stronger on this than the great senator from New Jersey, Cory Booker. Somebody I have known since I was the superintendent of schools in Denver. He was the mayor in Newark. There isn't anybody that has fought harder for the kids in this country than Cory Booker. So I give you the great senator from New Jersey, my friend Cory Booker.
All right, give it up for Bennett. Woo! Bennett Booker Brown, the Killer Bees. And then the CT six-pack, I like that, the CTC six-pack. It's the closest I'll ever come to a six-pack. I'm thrilled to be here, and I want to read this. This is from the New York Times. It said, and I quote, "Child poverty fell to a record low, and the program that did the most to reduce it vanished." This is what we lost. All the celebration of what we did, but this transformational program that changed the lives of millions of middle-income, low-income, working-class families and children vanished. It was on track to cut the poverty rate all the way in half. It offered financial relief to 90% of families, 90% of American families, not just Democratic families, not just independent families, not just Republican families, but American families. And so critics want to talk about cost, but this is the thing that we've heard. This is the most fiscally conservative program. We know that. Because again, the New York Times has said, and the data shows, every dollar invested, as was said before, lifts about $7 to $8 in our economy. But I love what Brother Bennett does. He talks about the real people in the state of Colorado. I know New Jersey is his second favorite state. One mother with 2 daughters was able to spend more time with her family and take her children to cheerleading classes. No working, that 2 jobs. It takes away a mom from her kids. A mother of 3 used her money to buy school supplies, backpacks, notes, a new uniform, and sneakers. Here's a great, in my neighboring state, in Pittsburgh, this father used the money to buy new clothes after he heard about his son being taunted by his fellow classmates. He actually saved the money he had. He said he wanted to take his kids on a vacation to do a single night in a state park, and saw the happiness on his children's faces. We know that this program works. We know it works for the economy. We know it works to create jobs. We know it works to elevate human well-being. We know it works to relieve stress. We know it works to empower people. You know it works to help us to raise better children in this nation. And the science is amazing. It literally has been shown to improve the brain activity of our young people, because we know kids growing up in poverty have all of that cortisol, all of that stress hormones constantly in their heads affecting their brain development. And so I don't know why we are having to fight so hard when there's no losers here. But you've heard the pledge of so many of my colleagues here. The losers are going to be, if we don't do this, we're going to hold back and fight to stop tax credits for the wealthiest corporations. This is not an either or, this can be an and. This can be all of us, all of America. I'm tired of people calling programs like this a government handout. It's not. It's a America elevation. We are a nation right now where we know that when we empower families, working families, American families, the whole country benefits. What are we about if not that? What do our founding documents say? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Talk to families that receive this, and you'll hear about them being liberated from fear, liberated from stress, about them able to pursue their happiness. And so I just want to end with this before I bring on the next speaker. I think that Senator Brown said it best. I can't think of something that we've accomplished in Congress. And I've worked on things from environmental justice policy all the way to criminal justice reform. There has been nothing we have accomplished as a Congress in my lifetime as important, as impactful, as necessary, as urgent, as morally righteous as a child tax credit. Now we need to make it permanent. That is the work. This is the moral moment, and I believe that together, this incredible coalition represented by some great leaders here, this is the work we have to do. And so now I have the pleasure of bringing up Chris. Chris, you ready? I'm ready. So this is a champion, he's a leader, but I just want you to know, I danced at his wedding. I cried when I didn't catch the bouquet. But this is truly one of my friends, one of our champions, and I'm excited to bring him up right now. Would you all give it up for Chris, please?
Thank you, Senator Booker, and thank you to the families, the activists, and the CTC6 who've all made it here today. Hi, my name is Chris Hughes. I'm the co-founder of Economic Security Project. We are an organization that advocates for the expansion of the child tax credit and other income support and anti-monopoly programs. As you've heard today, over the past several weeks, it's become very clear that Congress must pair any expansion of R&D tax credits with an expansion of the child tax credit. Senators and representatives have said that, not just the ones here today, but others in this building behind us. And the White House has said that. In fact, several colleagues and I just came from a meeting with senior advisors at the White House where they were very clear that this remains one of their top priorities to get done here before the end of the year. And the reality is, the child tax credit is enormously effective and popular, as you've heard today. We all know the stats about child poverty, but sometimes we forget about the opportunity that sits in front of us today. If senators and representatives behind us in this building can organize over the next few weeks, 36 million American families could see their lives transformed within days. 36 million. It is incredible, the scale of what we're talking about. And it's not just to the families who receive these dollars. It also goes into local communities, local economies, supports small business, and encourages entrepreneurship. The Niskanen Center found that if an expanded child tax credit were in place for another year, it would support the equivalent of 500,000 private sector jobs. And Columbia University found that every dollar of federal child tax credit payments generates 8 in social and economic benefits. Finally, these checks are not just good policy, they're also good politics. As we saw last night in Georgia, and as we saw last month across the country, the candidates who choose to run on supporting American families with the child tax credit win. Some of the smartest minds in Democratic politics, Stan Greenberg and others, have looked at the public opinion research and have arrived at the conclusion that there are fewer policies that are more relatable in the lives of Americans and garner more support. So I hope you all will join me in saying that over the next 2 weeks, we should not allow Congress to go home for the holidays without passing an expanded child tax credit, and certainly no tax credits for R&D and for corporations without supporting and helping American families. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, we have 3 speakers left, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. Next on the mic is Ishani Gaston, a very proud Moms Rising member from the great state of North Carolina.
Hi y'all, so as he said, my name is Ishani Gaston. I'm from Durham, North Carolina, and yeah, this is Amelia, my son. I'm here to fight for the expansion of the child tax credit because I know how badly it would impact mothers just like me and people just all over. Amelia is my heart and soul. If anybody knows us or have seen us before, that is my baby. When he was born, he came out with some health defects, so it kind of set us back a lot. So with me working, It was really hard. And it's sad that we had to go through so many challenges within his short period of time because the United States does not have a care infrastructure. Before I gave birth in February of this year, I was working 3 different restaurant jobs. And when it was time for me to give birth, I ended up having to let all 3 go. One of them said that I would have to reapply in order to come back, and by the time I was ready to come back, the other 2 jobs were unavailable. I applied for unemployment, but that didn't go through. So at the same time that I lost my paycheck, I gained expenses, diapers, wipes, formula, everything that a newborn baby needs. I drained out my savings, and I hate that I had to go back to work early. I had a C-section, y'all. I needed time to recover. My son had health defects. He needed time to recover. He needed my attention. Since I've returned back to work, it's been terrible finding childcare. We have programs, but either you have to sit on a long wait list, months, years, who knows how long, or it's expensive. I can't afford that. Paying childcare, you're going to take at least half my check, if not my whole check, and that's a lot. Luckily, I had a friend who was willing to help me. She watches them for free, but she stays in another city. I catch the bus. There's no bus stops near her house. So to get him to her, I have to catch the bus to a whole nother city. Then on top of that, get off the bus and walk about 30 minutes to her house to get him to her, then go back to get to my job. My job is 9 minutes away from my house. That's a shame that somebody should have to do that. It's hard. Working at my job, we are very understaffed. We don't have nobody there, so there's days that I'm cooking, cleaning, doing the whole 9 yards by myself on a low wage. And we can't do that. Then having to get off of work and go back to pick up my son to take that long trip again, that's becoming a lot. Right now, I'm working an on-call type job, so it's kind of whenever she needs me, so it's hard. I don't have an income like that. Trying to find childcare that's closer to home, a job that can suit me and my family's needs, because not only am I here with me and my son, I'm with my mom, because it's been easier. So I'm staying with my mom right now. I feel like lawmakers really don't understand what we go through. Honestly, I don't. Y'all don't have to worry about where y'all going to get y'all next meals from, what y'all kids are going to eat, how y'all are going to get back and forth to work. Especially with COVID, the rising cost of food, gas, and basic necessities. I know there are plenty of other families out here who are facing similar challenges than mine. Us as mothers, we move mountains for our kids. We go above and beyond, and I'm going to always go above and beyond for my son no matter what it takes. So right now, more than ever, we need y'all support. Mothers need support. If Congress expanded the child tax credit again, it'll be a huge relief for my family. We really would not have to struggle anymore. I'm getting tired of worrying about the basics. Just trying to make sure that my son can make it, that he can survive. Holidays coming up, his birthday's coming up. Nobody wants to have to worry about things like that, and it's sad. I want my son to be able to have education. I want him to be able to experience good education. Expanding the child tax credit would bring a big relief off my shoulders so I wouldn't have to stress as much. And we all know that expanding the child tax credit would be a big help because it helped last year with everybody. Y'all lifted millions of kids out of poverty. So why would you let that expire? What in your right mind would let you want that to expire when you saw the change that it made last year? Why not keep that going if it's something that's beneficial? It is something that could help. So we're here because we want lawmakers to make this change. We want y'all to be able to do what's right before the end of the year's out. This is something that would be a huge first step to lifting up the economy. Not just for y'all, not just for them, but for everybody. We also need lawmakers to solve our child care crisis. Guarantee paid leave for everyone. Not just y'all, not just them, but for everyone. Y'all, it's been 12 years. Please raise the minimum wage. Yes. Please. We cannot afford to live off these wages no more. Nobody can afford to do that. And we also need structural change. So I'm here standing with mothers, all children, all families today, saying do your job. Make a change. Thank you.
Thank you, Ishani. One of the CTC6 from the great state of Washington, one of our champs, the great Representative Susan Del Bene.
Thank you.
Thank you. I particularly want to thank you, Shani, for joining us, for sharing her story. This is really what this work is all about. I want to thank the Economic Security Project and Moms Rising and others who've been involved and been such strong voices for the child tax credit. And of course, to my colleagues, the CTC6, for all of the work that that they have done and we've been able to do in collaboration with each other. It's because of that work, the stakeholders, families across the country, congressional leadership, President Biden, that we were able to get the expanded child tax credit passed. And we have come so far in that year where that the expanded child tax credit was in place. In fact, 2 years ago, people weren't talking about the child tax credit. The impact wasn't there. We knew we had to make a change. And so we secured that 1-year expansion of the child tax credit in the American Rescue Plan and made an incredible difference. It started delivering those monthly checks to families. And then we saw, and quickly, I mean, no one thought we could get that out as quickly as it happened. It happened quickly. Monthly checks got out to families. And we had an incredible impact. Now, I'm a data person. I care a lot about the data. And I think, as Congresswoman DeLauro said, we have a lot of data to support the incredible work. Childhood poverty was cut nearly in half by the end of 2021. In communities of color, single-parent households, and others who had the greatest need, the impact was significantly stronger. It's remarkable that a single federal policy can claim such an impact. Now, I'm a mom, I'm a new grandma, and any parent knows that kids don't grow up in a year. Kids don't grow up in a year, right? So a program that only lasts a year is by far not enough. We need to bring the expanded child tax credit back so families have predictability, so that they have stability that they need going forward. We get an incredible return on the investment that we make in our kids and our families. Everyone up here understands this is a hard task. We've had folks talk about, their unwillingness to support this program, other members of Congress. But the data is clear. The data is clear on the impact it has on families. The stories are incredible. The stories have then the impact on families, what they've been able to do. And we're talking about things like continue to pay for housing, buying food, buying basic needs for their kids, buying diapers, incredibly expensive for many families. And so there is a deal to be had to make sure that we continue to move this forwards. Investing in our kids should not be a partisan issue. We know that we have an opportunity to expand the child tax credit to keep it going forward. And there's an opportunity for us to do that and work with Republicans in an issue that they've also cared about on the R&D tax credit. So the message from me, I'm the chair of the New Democrat Coalition. We put out a letter to leaders saying we have an opportunity to renew the expanded child tax credit and address the R&D fix together. Let's do both. Let's do it together. This gives us the opportunity to make a strong investment in our families, a strong investment in our economy. So the evidence is clear. The monthly child tax credits helped get parents back to work because they could finally afford childcare or simply gas for their car. We only have a few weeks left in this Congress, so we have an incredible opportunity right now. There's a path forward. We're going to continue to work relentlessly to make that happen. And the way we do that is by sharing these incredible stories, by talking to our colleagues, by using all the great data we have, and by making sure that we have strong voices. And another incredibly strong voice as part of the CTC6 has been my great colleague from the state of New York, Richie Torres. Richie.
Thank you. First, it's an honor to be here as not only a representative, but also a card-carrying member of the Rosa DeLauro fan club. I'm a Rosa DeLauro fan first and then a Yankee fan. But as has been said, in a country as wealthy as ours, child poverty is not an inevitability. It is a choice. We in Washington, D.C. have the tools to radically reduce poverty. What is desperately needed now more than ever is the political will. And there's often on the far right a false narrative that portrays poverty as a failure of personal responsibility and as a function of personal choice. But I've never met a child who chose to be born into poverty. I've never met a child who chose to be born into poverty. And yet when children are born into poverty through no fault of their own, it has consequences that haunts them for the rest of their lives. It leads to lower attendance rates, lower test scores, lower graduation rates, lower employment rates, lower lifetime earnings. We know that poverty paralyzes children in the most formative years of life. And as the representative of the South Bronx, which is often said to be one of the poorest congressional districts in America, I know firsthand that the child tax credit is a lifesaver and a game changer for the thousands of families I represent. I've spoken to mothers who have escaped financial dependency on violent domestic abusers because of the expanded child tax credit. I've spoken to students who finally can access the internet, who are no longer at the losing end of the digital divide because of the expanded child tax credit. I've seen families avert eviction from their homes and displacement from their communities because of the expanded child tax credit. There is no other policy that we have enacted here in Washington, D.C. that has done so much for so many so quickly. The breadth and depth of the CTC's impact is second to none, and since it is second to none, it should be the #1 priority in the agenda of the United States Congress. And at a time when families are struggling with the crippling cost of living, expanding the child tax credit has taken on new urgency. You know, much has been said about inflation, but expanding the child tax credit is the proper policy response to inflation. An expanded child tax credit would enable the families hardest hit by inflation to afford the life necessities most affected by inflation. The research has shown that the most common uses of the CTC are food, utilities, and housing. And so it is extraordinarily effective because it targets the families in greatest need in the areas of greatest need. You know, those of us who are in Congress, we became public servants because we believe that we have an obligation not only to ourselves, but to others, that there's a social contract to be upheld. And nowhere is that social contract more sacred than when it comes to our children. I have a simple question for every member of Congress. If we are not here to protect our children, if we are not here to lift them out of poverty and afford them a decent and dignified life, then what are we here for? We never should have put an expiration date on the child tax credit because there should never be an expiration date on our core commitment to children. And I'll end on this note. During COVID-19, we saw in the peak of the pandemic, essential workers put their lives at risk so that the rest of the country could safely shelter in place. Our essential workers always deliver for them, for us, and yet Washington, D.C. rarely delivers for them. And we need to change that. We need to get the deal done. We need to expand the child tax credit because the greatest investment in our future is not the development of corporate America, it's the development of our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Torres, and all of our speakers. So we have a few minutes for Q&A for any of the speakers that you heard from. You were stunned by the stories and the data. Please.
Would any of the members of Congress please talk about what they've heard from Republicans about this R&D and CTC trade proposal?
Well, you know, I mean, we all know what happens at the end of the year. There are discussions that are occurring around what will come out of, and Congresswoman Del Bene sits on the Ways and Means Committee, That would be the committee that will make a determination of what happens with the tax extenders. I will just say the chair of that committee, Congressman Neal of Massachusetts, is a strong supporter of the child tax credit and understands that this has to be a part of whatever an end of year negotiation is. We have not, our Republican colleagues have been at the outset, none have been willing to move forward in support of a child tax credit. If we'd had the votes on the Republican side in the Senate, we would have been able to get a child tax credit and get it passed. So I have to assume that they're still not willing to move forward, but unless they understand clearly and definitively that there will be no R&D tax credits, and I support R&D tax credits, that there will be no bonuses at the end of the year if it is not in conjunction with a child tax credit. You can't have one without the other. Now, there may be some that do want to weaken the child tax credit, put restrictions on it. I'll speak for myself, hell no. We have a program that works. And as everyone has said here who have spoken, that we haven't seen the likes of a federal program work as well as the child tax credit. And I've been here for 32 years. I've seen a lot of federal programs. This one works. We should have it as it is, and that's the case we are going to make to the end of the year. I hope, because one of our colleagues said this is not about Democratic families, it's not about Republican families. It's about American families who deserve to have this tax break.
That hell no speaks for all of us.
Hell no is definitely a mic drop moment. Another question, please?
I'm with this site that it's run by state and local officials around the country. And can you talk about like why this is important for ordination cities and counties?
I think the reason this is important is because it's helping families in every community across the country, in every county across the country. And when we make investments with our kids, we lift up our communities. There is a cost to doing nothing. We talk about the investment we make, the child tax credit. Doing nothing has an even larger cost in terms of the impact of our kids, both in the short term and the long term, and in the impact of our communities. But if kids are doing well and thriving, families are thriving, that helps with the workforce, not only workforce today, but our future workforce. It helps in terms of people's participation in the community and to help strengthen our communities. So there's broad impact across the country and broad impact just individually for families, but absolutely it's a strong policy that helps our communities, that helps our counties, that helps our states. Fundamentally, it helps everyone across the country.
I agree. When Washington, D.C. fails, it undermines state and local government. So take the issue of housing. This child tax credit enables families to avert eviction, to avert displacement. But when families are evicted, the burden of sheltering those families falls on state and local government. And so we're in a position to enact systemic change that would solve the problems that are weighing so heavily on state and local government. In New York City, for example, we have over 60,000 people in our shelter system. We have over 100,000 students who are unstably and temporarily housed. Imagine how many fewer students would face homelessness and housing insecurity if we were to expand the child tax credit.
And I'll just add, you heard the numbers from the Columbia University study earlier. $1 of the child tax credit turns into $7 to $8, boost up local economies. Sales tax at the city and state level, that's tax revenue for vital services. So the evidence is unmistakable on this point. Other questions? Yeah.
I know there's been some mention of the earned income tax credit as well. I think Senator Brown mentioned it. I was wondering if members here view that as tied into these discussions and related to what you're hoping to get on the child tax credit.
I would say yes.
There isn't a specific proposal on on the earned income tax credit, but we always talk about the earned income tax credit and what effect that it has had. Our focus has been on the child tax credit because of the impact that it has made and the real transformative nature of it. It's true on the earned income tax credit. I'm sure that will be part of the discussion, but our focus has been singularly on the child tax credit and making sure that it doesn't go by the boards here, and we look at those corporations, and I'll repeat it, many of whom do not pay taxes at all in this country, that they're not the beneficiaries, that our children are the beneficiaries.
Maybe one more?
How's things looking in terms of restoring the increase in the low-income housing tax?
So we have legislation to expand the low-income housing tax credit. Actually, it's my legislation in the House and Senator Cantwell in the Senate. There are provisions of that legislation, the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act, provisions that we're trying to get an end-of-year package to expand the low-income housing tax credit so that it can be able to finance more projects, so we have more housing availability across affordable housing across the country.
How's things looking in terms of doing that in
It's bipartisan legislation, and we have bipartisan support. But as we know, there's still lots of discussion on everything. So I can't tell you specifically where it stands. We have support. It's another important provision, but right now the discussions still happen, and I don't think we have any more details specifically.
With that, thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you to the CTC 6, our champions in Congress. Thanks to all of the most affected, all of us here. You can find the members of Congress here if you want to ask them more questions.
I know. That was the